Welcome to Radio Veritas, the Catholic radio station. Thank you for joining us. The programme you're listening to is Changing Gear. And as usual on this Thursday afternoon, it's myself, Archbishop Slattery from Pretoria. Thank you for joining us. And as you make your way home and as your day closes down, or as perhaps even your day begins, spend this time with us as we try to offer you words of inspiration, words of reflection, words that are maybe different from what's coming to you in so many other media. I'm delighted to be with you once again. It's a beautiful day here in Johannesburg. Roads are very busy, but the weather is magnificent. I suppose if we look at the news these days, what impacts most upon us, certainly today, if I've been listening to the news at all, it's all about strikes. Seemingly everybody in the country is on strike. And what is the Church's position about strikes? Well, I'm quoting from the Catholic Catechism and commenting a little on it. It says, recourse to a strike, a strike in an industry, in a mine that we've seen every day. Recourse to a strike is morally legitimate. It's okay when it cannot be avoided, or at least when it is necessary to obtain a proportionate benefit. It becomes morally unacceptable when accompanied by violence. So if there's a violence in a strike, that is not acceptable to the Church. Or again, it's not acceptable when objectives are included that are not directly linked to working conditions or are contrary to the common good. So those going on strike have to bear that in mind, that it must be within the common good, that it is linked with working conditions, and I do think in many cases this is justified, and also when there is no violence, then strikes are indeed sometimes necessary as a bargaining process in order for workers to be accepted. If you look at the Industrial Revolution that took place in Europe from the beginning of the 18th century, for 150 years, we would say, there was tremendous numbers of people moving from country areas, moving into cities and being unprotected there. They were hired for almost nothing. They had no protection. And during the 19th century, they began to organise themselves into unions in order to be able to dialogue and put some pressure really on capital, on the owners, on industrialists, on the mine owners, to give them better conditions and better wages, which were often unjust because a worker is deserving of his wage. Now, the Catholic Catechism also says a just wage is the legitimate fruit of work. To refuse or withhold a just wage is a grave injustice. In determining fair pay, both the needs and the contributions of each person must be taken into account. Remuneration for work should guarantee the person the opportunity to provide a dignified livelihood for himself and his family on the material, social, cultural and spiritual level, taking into account the role and the productivity of each, the state of the business and the common good. Agreement between the parties is not sufficient to justify morally the amount to be received in wages. And I think this has been behind some of the great labour problems we have in South Africa, is that sometimes mine owners or industrialists felt, look, if the way the workers agree to work for this wage, then it is a just wage. The Church is asking for more. It's saying to the industrialists, to the mine owners, when you are assessing what wage to pay your workers, you must look at their standard of living, where they're living and how they're living. And you may have heard me interviewing Bishop Kevin Dowling, working in the area of Marikana, and he says this was indeed caused a lot of dissatisfaction and unhappiness in the whole Marikana situation, is that workers were not living in decent conditions. And so therefore these things must be all taken into consideration. So it's a time of strike, and as a church one appeals for peace, one appeals for negotiation, one appeals for a just wage meaning something that allows workers the opportunity to care for their families and to have at least the possibility of a human and dignified life. And so we pray for peace in our country in these weeks ahead when we are faced with very serious strikes.